Every time someone goes in the water, they are taking a risk. Every time we move a piece of the structure, the situation could become even more dangerous. We have to move fast, but we cannot be careless.
In Baltimore, as crews start clearing away tons and tons of mangled steel and concrete, the battle over who is to blame for that bridge collapse is just getting started, too. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. It is quick work and one of the most important signs of progress we've seen. Tonight, a temporary channel is now up and running to give salvage boats access to that wreckage site to help with clearing away the debris. And a 200-ton span of the bridge has already been removed, which is just a small fraction of the up to 4,000 tons of debris that came crashing down. That's something like 8 million pounds. Now, crews are using cutting torches to slice steel beams into pieces so they can be carried away. And this is before they take on the task of moving that massive dolly cargo ship that brought the bridge down nearly a week ago, killing 6 construction workers, 4 whose bodies are still missing. Now, this comes as we are learning the owner and the manager of the cargo ship filed a petition in federal court earlier today looking to avoid liability for the collapse. And NBC News' Aaron Gilchrist joins us now. Aaron, those 4 bodies, they still have not been recovered. Is that because of the conditions out there?
That is a big part of it, Gadi. As we understand it, they've not been able to put divers, recovery divers, in the water since the conditions in the water make it really too difficult for them to see much farther than a foot or 2 in front of their faces. Largely, that is because of all of the debris from the bridge collapse that is still in the water. Of course, as they work to break up the bridge into smaller pieces that they can then use cranes to lift and then barges to get out of this area, they're going to be able to clear more of that water and eventually put divers in to recover those bodies. These families are waiting for some closure in this incident, and so that is an important part of the mission here at the Patapsco River, Gadi.
And Aaron, I wanted to ask you about this petition filed today by the owner and manager of the cargo ship. Is this a procedural formality? Does this thing normally happen when you see a disaster like this, or are they saying why they think they shouldn't be held liable?
Well, I don't think it's wildly unusual that the owner of this ship would make a move like this. What they've done is they've gone to a court and said that they want to limit their liability from the accident here. They're saying in their filing that they do not believe or that they did not have any knowledge of any issues with the ship that would have caused this accident to happen. And so in doing that, they're saying they would want to limit their liability to pretty much the value of the ship and the contents of the ship, which would keep people who may have been impacted by this. Obviously, we know that several people have died here, and so their families might be inclined to sue. This is their effort to say that they don't believe that they should be held liable to the point where they could be sued outside of what they believe the value of the ship and the items on the ship to be at this point, Gadi.
And we'll keep a close eye on how that progresses. Meanwhile, port workers, they're getting hit really hard by all of this. What's the latest on work over at the port?
Yeah, we know we're talking about 8,000 dock workers who are not able to work. The majority of them are not able to work now because the port of Baltimore is closed. This is having a really adverse impact on these workers because they obviously rely on this work to pay them and for them to be able to take care of their responsibilities. I want you to hear from one dock worker we spoke to earlier today about his concerns as he's playing this waiting game. Listen.
Every day you're thinking about the future and the uncertainty. You lose some sleep over it, got bills to pay, but deep down, I believe in the people that run the port, and I believe we're going to be okay.
So Chris has some degree of hope and faith that this is going to be a process that will work itself out in terms of them being able to get back to some sort of work and being able to have some understanding about what income will look like. He believes that that's going to happen fairly soon in maybe the next several weeks. We should also note, Gadi, that the Small Business Administration opened a resource center here in Baltimore today, actually, and that is going to be a way for small business owners to go and figure out what information they need to gather together to apply for these low low-interest loans that the federal government will make available up to $2 million. So these businesses that are impacted by the closure of the port here and by the inability to access that area can figure out how they can keep their businesses running, keep their employees paid until we can get some resolution on clearing this waterway. Gadi?
So many people affected by this disaster. Aaron Gilchrist, thanks so much. Don't go anywhere. We've got more news ahead just coming up. Up next is a huge ruling from the Florida Supreme Court on abortion. We've got those details, plus a wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs is connected to a crash involving a Lambo and a Corvette. We're going to tell you what we know tonight. And there's a big change coming to hospitals, and it all has to do with consent on exactly what can happen when you go under. We're going to explain. That's all just ahead, so stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back, and here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Today, the Florida Supreme Court ruled to uphold a 15-week ban on abortion in the state, which opens the door for a 6-week abortion ban that Governor Ron DeSantis signed last year. The 6-week ban takes effect in 30 days, but voters will ultimately have the final say, as an amendment will be on the ballot in November. And AT&T says personal data from millions of current and former customers were found on the dark web. Things like social security numbers, passcodes, and phone numbers were leaked. AT&T has already started reaching out to affected customers, offering credit monitoring services. An investigation is underway. And in an interview on Meet the Press over the weekend, Republican Congressman Don Bacon warned that his colleague Mike Johnson could lose his speakership.
Do you think he could lose his speakership over this, Congressman?
It's possible. I'm not going to deny it. We have one or two people that are not team. They're not team players. They'd rather enjoy the limelight, the social media. It's a very narrow majority, and one or two people can make us a minority.
Bacon said Johnson could face a vote to oust him as Speaker if he moves to pass Ukraine aid in the House, something Johnson promised to turn his attention to when the House returns from recess next week. And a man is in custody after ramming a car into a gate at an Atlanta FBI office. Police say the suspect tried to follow an employee car into the gate, then rammed into the barrier once it closed. No one was hurt, and officials are considering both state and federal charges. And former NFL cornerback Vontae Davis was found dead in his grandmother's Florida mansion today. Details on how Davis died were not released, but police suggest that foul play was not involved. The two-time Pro Bowl athlete was 35 years old. And tonight, a lawyer for NFL star Rashee Rice says he is cooperating with police as they investigate a 6-car crash in Dallas that may have involved one of his cars. Now, this wild wreck was caught on this dash cam video over the weekend, and NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson has more.
For the first time since this terrifying crash, Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice is responding amid reports that his car may have been involved. His attorney writing in a statement that Rice is cooperating fully with authorities and will take all necessary steps to address this situation responsibly, adding his thoughts are with everyone impacted. The response comes 48 hours after this 6-car crash, caused, police say, by this Lamborghini and Corvette speeding down the expressway.
The major accident on the freeway at 6700 block of North Central Expressway northbound.
Dramatic dash cam video shows the moment police say the drivers lost control, one car slamming into the center median as the other appears to spin out. Kayla Quinn says she and her 4-year-old son were headed home after a day at the zoo when they were among those hit. This could have ended way worse, she wrote on social media. Both cars hitting me, yet me and my baby walked out untouched. Police say all injuries were minor, and the occupants of the Lamborghini and the Corvette all ran from the scene. Moments after the crash, a bystander captured this video.
You guys all right? Yeah, that's it. Where are you guys heading? You guys all right? Yeah. You guys just gonna leave it?
Tonight, the NFL not commenting, but the Chiefs president telling KCMO Talk Radio this.
We'll get to the bottom of it. We'll gather the facts, and then we'll react accordingly.
Dallas police are not saying if Rice was involved in the actual crash, and they're asking for the public's help in identifying the men in that video. Gadi?
Priscilla Thompson, thanks so much. Now, medical school students across the country are getting new guidelines for exactly what they can and can't do while a patient is put to sleep for a medical procedure, like get a prostate or a pelvic exam that you never asked for. And if you're like, wait, what? Why would someone get an unexpected exam like that while under anesthesia? Well, take a look at this. A 2022 study found that as many as 3.5 million Americans might have been examined without consent, with the study calling the findings a, quote, conservative estimate. Now, federal officials are sending out letters to teaching hospitals and medical schools with strict guidelines saying written consent is needed from patients to perform those kinds of procedures. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Vin Gupta is here to break this down. Dr. Gupta, this whole thing seems to be a little eyebrow-raising and also kind of obvious. Like, of course, you'd think a doctor would need consent to do a prostate exam. What's going on here?
Yeah, Gadi, good evening. This is disturbing, and frankly, this shouldn't be happening. The fact that this is happening goes to show how non-standardized basic patient care and patient rights is across the country. Things that you would think other physicians, other providers wouldn't need to be told what to do, even in a teaching hospital. Here we are now having to really navigate this and provide standardization, and frankly, a pretty strong wrist slap with serious penalties if this is not followed. This should never have happened, point blank. This should never happen. I'm an ICU doc, Gadi. Everything I do when I'm trying to save somebody who's critically ill must be consented for either by the patient or by a loved one.
And Doctor, back in 2020, the New York Times found hospitals, doctors, and even doctors in training were conducting pelvic exams on women while they were under. Is this in response to that? And like, how does this happen? Is this something along the lines of, hey, you're a student, you haven't done one of these before, go ahead, or is there something else going on? I'm trying to imagine why this would all come about.
No, I share your confusion because this didn't happen in any of the training settings. I trained in New York City that I have been a part of or seen or been educated in directly. So this is not normal. It's confusing to me as well. But the way this probably happened is patients, Gadi, have to navigate a complex consent forms before they go into surgery under general anesthesia. They may not read everything. A lot of this paperwork is really confusing. So when they sign on the dotted line, they're signing to basically a blank check to do relevant procedures. That's the operative word here, relevant. Why are we in these select cases since 2020 is shown light on the fact that sometimes irrelevant things are being done that have no business being done and need to have consent prior to them being done, either from, again, the patient or the loved one. So again, the fact that this needs to be policed is the problem in the first place. Most places that I've been a part of have ethics, understand informed consent. You don't even have to talk about this.
Dr. Vin Gupta, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. And in Indianapolis, police are still searching for suspects after a mass shooting outside of a mall that left at least 7 people hurt on Saturday night. All of the victims were under 17 years old. NBC News correspondent Mara Barrett has the latest from Chicago.
Gadi, police say this still is very much an active investigation, though we're learning in just the last few hours that they say that this whole shooting was not random. They said that the groups, the children, frankly, because these are victims ranging from 12 to 17 years old, children and teenagers, had planned to, quote, take their beef downtown. So there was some sort of altercation, as police understand it, that resulted in gunfire, though police are still looking for answers and suspects, because even though they took in 2 juveniles, they detained 2 juvenile individuals for resisting police, they would not confirm to me whether or not they were involved in the shooting directly. So police say that they are reviewing surveillance cameras and video. They are following many different leads, but still very much an active investigation. There's also been questions swirling about the responsibility, if any, of the parents, because there is a city law that says that people under 15 years old cannot be out unsupervised at a late hour like that. And so there's been a lot of frustration from police in the last few days about the lack of accountability or wherewithal of the parents in all of this. I want to hear a little bit more from police.
Once again, we have a situation in which young people are resolving conflict with firearms, and it has to stop. This was at 11:30 at night, the evening right before Sunday, Easter. So if you don't know where your 12-year-old is, I think that should be a priority for you.
And so this frustration with the parents is something that was interesting for me to see, and something I haven't seen in covering mass shootings before, quite frankly, because obviously these are minors, and it was very late on a Saturday night after 11 p.m. or so. But there is the question of where these children are getting access to firearms or being around firearms in that sense, and just the broader issue of gun violence in general. And so it was interesting to see the focus on the parental supervision aspect. The mayor putting out a similar statement to what we heard from police there, though he did talk about new initiatives from the city to curb gun violence in general involving youth. They're going to be investing $150 million into this crime prevention strategy. And community leaders have also suggested enacting a curfew like we've seen in other cities, like here in Chicago, to curb the string of violence in recent years. Gadi.
NBC's Mara Barrett, thanks so much. And coming up, remember that mysterious illness making U.S. diplomats sick? Well, now Havana syndrome might be linked to Russia. We're going to explain. But first, you got to see this. And this is very apropos because I seem to be losing my voice here, and I'm very hoarse. And, well, these cops right here, they are not horsing around. Officers chased a shoplifter on horseback in New Mexico. That man tried to outrun those trusty steeds, but sorry, horses are too fast. He eventually found himself surrounded. He had to pony up what he stole, and he was charged with stealing over $200 worth of merchandise from a Walgreens. Who would have thought he would be caught by an animal? Hoof, hit it with the hoofs. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. The mysterious Havana syndrome continues to baffle investigators, but now a new report points to Russian spies. That story in just a moment. But first, let's take a quick look around the world. Germany soccer fans have been banned from putting the number 44 on its national jersey because of the apparent resemblance to the Nazi SS symbol that was used during World War II. Adidas, which makes the jerseys, put a ban in place after a German historian pointed out the similarities. The company also says it's working on an alternative design for the number 4. Also at midnight last night, Germany became the biggest EU country to legalize small amounts of marijuana. Adults can now carry up to an ounce of marijuana and keep twice that amount at home. They can also grow up to 3 plants for personal use. A 500-year-old church in England gets over 400 solar panels. We're talking about King's College Chapel in Cambridge. While environmentalists love the idea of retrofitting a building for climate change that's been around since pre-industrial times, some critics are seeing the whole thing as another example of virtue signaling. And Pope Francis preached peace for Gaza and Ukraine in his Easter speech yesterday. He said his thoughts went out to Israel and Palestine and asked once more for a ceasefire. He also called for a prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine and an all-out end to the war in Ukraine. And an Israeli airstrike in Syria hit part of the Iranian consulate there today, killing at least 2 senior members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard. Israel's military does not usually confirm strikes in Syria, and they've declined to comment, but has done so throughout its nearly 7-month war against Hamas. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets in Israel to protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, calling for new elections. And it comes as the Israeli military is finally withdrawn from Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, after a 2-week raid. They're saying they killed hundreds of Hamas fighters, all while the death toll in Gaza has crossed 30,000 Palestinians, according to the health ministry there. NBC's Josh Letterman reports.
New fears tonight about an escalating regional war involving Iran after Syria and Iran accused Israel of striking inside the Syrian capital of Damascus and hitting an Iranian diplomatic building at the embassy there. Iranian state media saying not 1 but 2 senior commanders of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards were killed in what it says was a strike by Israeli fighter jets and 6 missiles. Israel not commenting on that, but that's typical. They don't tend to comment on strikes inside of Syria, but it is the latest episode in this shadow war between Israel and Iran that has been playing out for months, if not years, raising a lot of fears about the possibility that it could bring Iran and Israel ultimately into a direct military conflict. That development coming as the U.S. and Israel have been holding a virtual meeting today about Israel's looming pending invasion of the city of Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, where more than 1 million Palestinians are sheltering. The U.S. trying to convince Israel to look at alternatives to a full-scale invasion of Rafah because of the risk of civilian casualties. After that virtual meeting, the U.S. government said that it was productive and that they would follow up potentially with an in-person meeting as soon as within the next week or so. And the concerns about Rafah have really grown deeper as a result of Israel's latest siege of the Al-Shifa hospital, a 2-week raid of that hospital in Gaza, the largest hospital in the Strip, where Israel says that it was able to kill hundreds of Hamas commanders without civilian deaths. But officials in the Gaza Strip say that Israel left behind a sea of corpses, many of them badly decomposing. They say children and civilians and elderly were among those killed there. It is a hospital that Israel had cleared of Hamas last year in November, but apparently Hamas was able to regroup there. Israel now facing more questions about whether it is able to successfully keep Hamas from returning to the parts of the Gaza Strip where it has already gotten rid of Hamas.
Josh Letterman, thanks so much. And we are following some breaking news right now. Former President Donald Trump has posted a $175 million bond in his New York civil fraud case. Now, Trump seems to have secured the bond through the California-based company Knight Specialty Insurance. Now, a court filing says Trump posted this bond to avert asset seizure while he appeals civil fraud penalties. And this comes 1 week after a panel of judges reduced Trump's bond and granted him a 10-day stay in that initial $464 million bond and judgment. Now, Russia is once again denying having anything to do with that mysterious neurological illness known as Havana syndrome affecting U.S. officials and diplomats around the world. And this comes after a joint 5-year investigation by CBS's 60 Minutes, the German newspaper Der Spiegel, and an independent media outlet, The Insider, that directly linked the illness to a Russian intelligence unit. That lengthy investigation contradicts U.S. reports, which does not blame any foreign adversary. NBC News and Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian is here with some new reporting tonight. Ken?
Gadi, 60 Minutes and a publication called The Insider have unearthed some interesting circumstantial evidence that members of an elite Russian intelligence unit may have been on the ground in places where U.S. personnel suffered symptoms associated with Havana syndrome. They also found documents suggesting those same Russian operatives may have been researching acoustic weapons. Now, they argue this evidence suggests a link between these Russian spies and Havana syndrome symptoms. 60 Minutes also interviewed a former defense intelligence official who helped investigate this issue, and he says he believes Havana syndrome is the result of Russian attacks, though he said he couldn't discuss the classified details. Important to say that none of this reporting found actual evidence of a weapon or of Russians attacking Americans. 2 U.S. intelligence officials told me the CIA and 5 other agencies stand by their assessment from last year that there is no evidence of any secret weapon wielded by Russia or any other foreign adversary in these matters. They say that most, if not all, of what was reported last night had already been examined as part of one of the biggest intelligence investigations in U.S. history, an investigation that all but ruled out the attack theory. Officials say that if Russia had a secret microwave or acoustic weapon being used to attack Americans, they believe they would have found some evidence of that through years of intelligence collection from human sources, hacked documents, and communications intercepts. But they found none. U.S. officials are not saying this is made up. The symptoms experienced by these people are heartbreaking and very real. But the investigation found that they were likely caused by environmental and health factors. And a study by the National Institutes of Health published last month found that Havana syndrome victims showed no signs of brain injury, contradicting previous studies. It's also worth mentioning, Gadi, that since this intelligence assessment was published last year, officials say reports of symptoms have plummeted. Gadi?
Fascinating. Ken Delanian, thank you so much. Now, it was somewhat of a royal Easter over in the UK, with King Charles finally making a public appearance at this year's Easter Sunday service. This was his first public appearance since he was diagnosed with cancer back in February. Missing from action, though, William, Kate Middleton, and their 3 children. And this comes just days after the Princess of Wales announced her own cancer diagnosis. NBC's Kelly Kobiea has more.
Happy Easter, keep going strong.
Messages of support for King Charles and Princess Kate from holiday crowds in Windsor.
Best wishes to Princess of Wales.
A smiling King Charles surprised well-wishers, shaking hands after Sunday's Easter church service. It's the 75-year-old monarch's first major public appearance since the palace announced he was being treated for cancer in February. Headlines declaring it a show of strength and a sign he's getting better.
Buckingham Palace have said that it's a really positive sign that we saw the King on Easter Sunday. It's very encouraging that we saw him mixing with the crowds. However, we haven't heard the same from Kensington Palace about the Princess of Wales. We shouldn't read too much into that. She said herself in her own public statement that she needs to concentrate on her rest and recovery with her ongoing cancer treatment.
The traditional Easter walk to church scaled back this year. The King and Queen and the King's siblings and their partners smiling for the crowds, including Prince Andrew's ex-wife Sarah Ferguson, diagnosed with skin cancer earlier this year. Last year, Prince William and Kate's youngest son made his first appearance at Easter services. But this year, the young family stayed away, spending the weekend together privately after Kate's cancer announcement.
This, of course, came as a huge shock. And William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family.
Her last public appearance was Christmas of last year. The Princess of Wales said the past couple of months have been incredibly tough for her entire family.
We hope that you'll understand that as a family, we now need some time, space, and privacy while I complete my treatment.
The princess is spending time privately with her family over the next couple of weeks as her kids are on school break. The palace has said, in terms of the king, that yesterday's appearance was a very encouraging sign on how his treatment is progressing as we move toward summer.
Kelly Copiella, thanks so much. And still to come, Chad Daybell's trial is finally underway. He's charged in the deaths of his wife and his girlfriend's 2 young children. We've got those details right after the break, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. A 40-mile stretch of California's Highway 1 is still shut down after part of it collapsed into the Pacific Ocean during that major storm in Big Sur this past weekend. Close to 2,000 drivers were stranded overnight, a lot of them forced to sleep in their cars or temporary hotels turned into shelters. Now, yesterday, emergency crews escorted drivers out after making sure the northbound lanes were stable. That highway is still being repaired. Video here shows a man hanging onto the side of a cliff last night before being rescued. Now, he fell 50 to 60 feet down from the trail in the Golden Gate National Recreation Area outside of San Francisco. Helicopter rescue workers thankfully were able to pull that man to safety with the help of that thermal camera imaging system. And to all you Southern Californians tuned in tonight, be sure to look up at about 7:30 Pacific time, fingers crossed. SpaceX is going to try to launch another Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base after postponing last week because of weather. Skywatchers as far as Sonoma, Reno, South Colorado, parts of Utah, New Mexico, and western Mexico may also be able to see that rocket as it heads to space. Over in Boise, Idaho, the trial of Chad Daybell started today, and this is Act 2 of that horrible case where this couple, Daybell and his wife, Lori Vallow, allegedly killed Vallow's 2 children, 7-year-old Joshua Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. The couple claimed they could tell if someone was possessed by dark spirits that would turn them into zombies, and the only way to get rid of the spirits was by killing the person. Lori Vallow's case is already closed. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole last year. But Daybell's case is just starting. He's being charged with not just killing the children, but also his first wife. And if convicted, he could face the death penalty. NBC's Dana Griffith is here to break this down. Now, Dana, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, they were supposed to be tried together, right? What happened?
Yeah. So essentially, the defense for Chad Daybell said, we want to do it separately because obviously it gives them a better chance of trying to win the case. Now, in Lori's case, that centered around money, power, sex, according to the prosecutors. And even her defense said that people didn't start dying until she met and started having an affair with Chad Daybell. So it's likely that for this case, they can now pin this on her. Now that she's been convicted for killing her own 2 kids, he can say, hey, it wasn't me, it was her. I was just following her lead. Not to say that that's going to happen, but that is likely. So it'll be interesting to see, what happens, but they want to be tried separately because it gives either a chance to try to at least, not be convicted in this case. But we obviously know Lori was.
Lori was convicted in this case, but no death penalty there. And yet in this case, Chad is looking at the possibility of a death penalty, right?
Yeah.
Why?
So essentially, it's based on a technicality, and it's called late disclosure of discovery. So before Lori's trial started, the defense said, hey, we didn't get all of our documents, all of the evidence until past the deadline. And it was just too much for them to go through. And that could have potentially not allowed them to go through and prepare a case. And the judge agreed. He said, hey, I've got to address this late disclosure issue, or the case is in jeopardy of being reversed if they try to appeal later. So they kind of came to an agreement of, okay, we're going to take the death penalty off the case because the prosecution gave you all of this discovery too late. And that was kind of how they decided. So technicality, she's not facing the death penalty, but Chad Daybell is.
A technicality that's the difference between possibly life and death. It's wild.
Exactly.
Now, I do want to ask about this gag order that the judge has issued in this case. What's going on there?
So the judge issued that because last week, Daybell's attorney gave a local media station an interview. And this is problematic because right now they are trying to get through jury selection. This is a case that reached international or got international intrigue. So in this town of, Boise, Idaho, they're trying to find impartial jurors. And so because of that, they say, look, no more talking until after opening statements because we need to make sure that we can get through these jurors. The jurors were given questionnaires last week. So the judge doesn't want any more media attention that could possibly taint the potential jury pool. And I got to tell you, this has been a very slow process. Jury selection started today. They need at least 50 potential jurors in this pool so that they can start striking people away. They've only gotten to 16 after hours of questioning. So they're going to start again tomorrow, and hopefully they can get this jury together by tomorrow so that they can get to opening statements. This trial is expected to last 8 to 10 weeks.
And meanwhile, the publicity continues.
It continues.
Dana, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And today, a new law kicks in here in California that boosts the salary of some fast food workers up to $20 an hour. Now, employees at a few of the biggest chains are included, like McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Starbucks, but critics are warning that this has downsides too. NBC News correspondent David Noriega has more.
Starting Monday, a pay boost for more than 500,000 Californians. Good news for Lizette Aguilar, who after 17 years working for McDonald's still has trouble making ends meet. We ask her how she feels.
¿Cómo te sientes?
Feliz, ansiosa de que
Eager, she says, for that first bigger paycheck. It'll help with bills, and maybe she'll get something special for her 9-year-old son, Marcos. California's new law sets a $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food workers, up from the current 16. Most workers affected are women of color.
This is a big deal. $20 an hour.
One of the biggest questions is how will this affect consumers, especially in a state where everything's already very expensive and a lot of people have a hard time affording basics like housing and food. McDonald's, Starbucks, Chipotle, and other major chains have said publicly they intend to raise prices. But by how much? Some economists anticipate about 5%, others as little as 2%.
So for a $5 Mac, that would be a dime, 10 cents. People notice it, but I don't think they'll change their behavior.
Critics say the wage increase will accelerate trends that hurt workers, like replacing cashiers with electronic kiosks. Some pizza franchise owners have already announced layoffs of in-house drivers, switching to third-party delivery apps instead. And there's no question the rise in labor costs will put pressure on franchise owners, like Carrie Harper Howie, whose family owns 21 McDonald's in the Los Angeles area.
We will, of course, as everyone else is, have to increase prices in some way, shape, or form. And what people don't understand is they say, oh, what does it matter? McDonald's and Taco Bell, they're just big corporations. We are family businesses.
Some fast food customers say even if they do pay more, it's a price worth paying.
I'm okay with it, because it feels like everything else is going up, and it's about time wages go up.
And let's bring in NBC's David Noriega to discuss this a little bit more. David, there's a lot of concern over this change, and I'm so glad you brought up the automated process. I feel like when I go to a fast food restaurant, a lot of times everything's automated already. Are we going to start seeing more of that because of this?
I think the because of this part of that question is the key part of that question, right? I think whenever there are minimum wage increases, often we talk about some changes in the labor market that are already happening as maybe being attributable to those increases in the minimum wage, and maybe they are, but I think that's what's happening in California right now with this wage increase. I think is going to be studied by economists in a lot of different ways for a long time to come, because it is a minimum wage increase for a specific, not even a specific industry, but a subset of a specific industry. So it's going to lead to a lot of interesting kind of comparative ways of studying what this does. People have pointed to automation as a concern. Layoffs, right? The pizza chains that laid off in-house delivery drivers, they did so to go to third-party delivery apps instead. Again, that's a process that has been underway for a while before this minimum wage increase. The most convincing case that I've heard is that this might accelerate those processes. It's certainly not causing them because they're already underway, but it might accelerate them. How much is really the question that I leave to the economists, and we ideally should be getting some answers about in the coming years.
This will be a causation versus correlation with the side of fries, I guess.
Exactly.
David, thanks so very much.
You got it.
And coming up a little bit later this hour, we are going to dive into the best of us. Before we go, it is time for that segment. We're going to be kicking off Autism Acceptance Month with a star from the hit Netflix show Love on the Spectrum. You're not going to want to miss this one, so stay tuned. And welcome back. Time now for the future of everything and a high-tech company crossover that could stop you in your tracks. Okay, so you know the company Boston Dynamics, these ones, the ones that are behind the super advanced humanoid robots that can walk around and lift heavy things and also do parkour?
Such a show-off.
Such a show-off. Okay, so now while that is fresh in your mind, you know the company Gravity Industries? They're the guys behind those crazy jetpack suits that search and rescue crews, even soldiers have been testing out that make you fly kind of like Iron Man, like this. Okay, well, guess who just announced a totally normal, nothing to freak out about, nothing could go wrong collab this morning? Both companies posting this pic on their social media with the press release talking about how they're teaming up to open the skies in a new era of humanoid robots. Yeah. Now, while reading this on my way to my doomsday bunker, there was one line in this press release that caught my eye. It's when they talked about these things being able to be used for skyscraping window washing. And then, like a responsible journalist, of course, we reached out to those companies. And yeah, we got played. Perfect April Fool's joke for 2024. Still hoping they let us try out those jet suits, though. Very funny, guys. Very, very funny. And while we won't be seeing flying robots anytime soon yet, you know what we will see in just 1 week? A total eclipse, and NASA is going to be using this phenomenon as an opportunity to study the sun, sending up 2 specially outfitted planes into the stratosphere to conduct 5 experiments. And NBC News national climate reporter Chase Kane got an early look at how it's going to go down.
NASA mechanics make their final checks on one of the 2 planes which will chase the eclipse to study our sun. Piloting this WB-57, Tom Parent will never forget his first time flying through an eclipse.
We've got the eye protection on, just like, you know, everybody's out on the ground, right? They've got the little paper glasses and stuff. And once it went to totality, as I look up, it's like, well, I can't see anything. Well, of course, it was in totality. So I realized, yeah, I got to take my visor off. Then it was pretty fantastic to look at that for a couple minutes.
NASA uses this plane for its experiments in part because it's tried and true. The WB-57 has been around since the 50s, but also because it can fly at 60,000 feet, well above any clouds, and also above about 90% of the Earth's atmosphere, so that's not getting in the way of these experiments.
It's really hard to measure the sun in midwave infrared from the ground because our atmosphere absorbs that light.
Amir Caspi is a solar astrophysicist whose instrument SAMI will be tucked into the nose of this plane. Sammy will focus on our sun's atmosphere, the corona, an approach he pioneered during the last total eclipse.
Back when I did this in 2017, this was a crazy idea. We didn't know if it was going to work. We didn't know what we would get. And it was nail-biting for quite some time. And then we got amazing data. I could see it coming down off the live satellite feed. And, of course, we're using a new instrument that's more capable and is able to get us a richer set of data, a richer set of observations.
One goal this year, to learn why the corona is millions of degrees hotter than the surface of the sun. Another, understanding the origin of solar winds, which can impact satellites, airplanes, and even our power grids here on Earth. And that's just one of 5 experiments on board these 2 planes, which will each have only about 6 minutes to seize this rare opportunity.
Yeah, that pressure, unfortunately, is for kind of every kind of mission that we fly. So we don't ever take things lightly. Like, people put their lives' work into these things, and we don't want to mess it up for them, right?
A total solar eclipse is like nature's perfect coronagraph. The moon comes between us and the sun, and it's exactly the right size in the sky to block out the disk of the sun, but not too much more. You know, we've been studying the sun for quite a long time. We still have a lot of open questions.
At NASA's Johnson Space Center, I'm National Climate Reporter Chase Kane.
And April is Autism Acceptance Month. And tonight we are talking love on the spectrum. One of our next guests could be described as a dating pro after she appeared in both seasons of the award-winning Netflix series. Viewers, dates, adoring fans quickly found out just how much of a force Dani Bowman truly is. Take a look.
How do you feel about going on another blind date?
Oh my goodness, this is going to be another exciting one. I can't wait. Who will it be?
I am in love with you.
Hello?
I think you are so hot.
Despite the potential backlash, I'm determined to normalize conversations about intimacy.
We, women on the autism spectrum, have our wants and needs. Usually I just start with the lips and then start doing the tongue afterwards. Okay, let's apply what we learn.
Ready when you are, teach.
Okay.
How's this?
So nice, but usually we start with the lips first.
Oh, of course.
And joining me now is Dani Bowman and Kristen Roth from the Autism Society of America. Welcome, Dani. I realized after watching that, I think I've been kissing the wrong way my entire life. I'm 40 years old. Sorry to my wife, but thanks for the lesson, Teach. I want to ask, how's your love life these days?
Well, with my love life these days, Adon and I are together. Even though we are apart when it comes to work, when it comes to work, and when it comes to work, Adon has university that he has to finish. Well, meantime, I have teaching animation because I have an animation company called D-Animation Entertainment, which I run for past 15 years.
Wow.
So we're trying to do our best as we can to find accommodations to have dates.
And at what point did he win you over?
How does he win me over? Well, I would say he's very trusting and I would say it's his honesty that definitely would really win me over. And his dedication to keep moving forward is a great thing.
I do want to ask about some projects that you all have in the works right now. And I want to ask Kristen, how important is this show?
It's so important to showcase diverse experiences and stories from the autism community, especially to not only combat stigma and break barriers, but to showcase that everyone has unique and individual experiences, because it is a spectrum, and we were talking about that a lot before we joined you today.
Love on the spectrum, and yet there is something so universal about love. Whenever you are speaking or whenever you're looking at each other, I mean, you can feel the love, right?
That is definitely true, and especially because you get to see, and what I see about love and what I've learned from this entire experience is that seeing from the heart and the soul is very important. It's not just the looks that would attract you. It's also about seeing the truth within the person.
And what have you learned being on the show?
What I really learned about being on the show is that it's always very important for the person on the autism spectrum to take things slow. It's not just for people on the spectrum, it's for anyone. To take things slow when you get to know the person for about 3 to 5 dates before you initiate in expressing your love or kiss or kiss.
I should have watched that before. I think I told my wife I loved her very early on, probably way too early on. This is Autism Awareness Month, right?
It's not just Autism Awareness Month, it's Acceptance Month.
Exactly.
And what Acceptance Month means, supporting inclusion of people of all different abilities, all parts of the spectrum, us on the autism spectrum. That as long as we ensure our safety, ensure our well-being, our belonging, and inclusion.
When it comes to the rest of us, for everybody on planet Earth, on Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, what can we do to turn this into action?
What can we do to turn this into action? So I think the business world, what they need to do is just to provide, if we have a little accommodations, like because we on the spectrum have communication and social skills barriers. So in order to break this barrier is that businesses will have to make some accommodations because look at us, most of us have different sensory needs. And if they provide accommodations for our sensory needs, we can excel into the business world. We are hard workers. Besides, we are an untapped resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Untapped resource and an inspiration for all of us. If you haven't seen Love on the Spectrum, it is absolutely incredible. I do want to talk one more question. This new project that you have, A Road to Acceptance, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So as part of the Autism Society's greater efforts for celebrating differences this Autism Acceptance Month, we have come up with the Road to Acceptance project. And thanks to our partners at Goodnights and Chrysler, we're able to hit the road and capture community stories all across the country. So by asking questions about health, employment, safety, and inclusion, that's how we're working to showcase and amplify the voices so that those diverse experiences are told and we can advocate for those added services and supports.
Kristen, Danny, I can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Likewise, thank you.
Sure. And that does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.